والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Thank you very much, Prof. Ghairu and Brother Shahran, and to all participants of the certificate program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Prof. Ghairu, for the intro, and Brother Shahran for the overall overview of the technicalities. Let me just say that we're targeting about 1.5 hours, so we may have to run into the a little bit into the break time. I hope nobody will mind. This particular part of the course is as the topic on the screen. I hope everybody can see the screen. That basically the session today is taken from a course that we teach at the undergraduate level at the Bachelor of Economics program called Foundations of Islamic Economics. I think what we are going to cover today in the 3 hours is probably it takes about 6 weeks to do in our normal course. Yeah, so please bear with me if we are going through the materials in a very, very brief manner. I'm sure for many of you who are attending the course, you are not new to economics or Islamic economics, and for those who are new, I hope that this will give some inputs to you. Now, in order to begin, as mentioned by Prof. Ghairu, we decided to make the sessions answer a central question, and that is, so in my 2 sessions this morning, basically we are answering very straightforward questions. The questions are: why do we need Islamic economics, Islamic finance, Islamic business and accounting and so on? Why do we need it? Yeah, so we want to make a rationale for Islamic economics. All right, and then although it's put as a second question, it's a slightly brief part of the presentation. What is Islamic economics? Now, why we spend more time on the why and less time on the what is because in the weeks to come you will be exposed to what Islamic economics and finance is. Okay, so for today's session, I'm just going to maybe very briefly try to give a working definition of Islamic economics, right? So more time will be spent on the why. And I think it's very important for us to know why we have to talk about Islamic economics. The reason being that we already have an economics that is, taught globally. All countries in the world, whether it is in the West, whether it is in the developing countries, in the Muslim world, we have universities, and in our universities we teach economics. And this economics is basically global. In other words, it's taught in all countries. We use the same textbooks. Yeah, well, we generally speaking, anybody who takes economics has the same understanding of theory of consumer behavior, theory of producer behavior. So we really have to ask ourselves, why do we need to have an alternative to this existing system? After all, many people will say that the material conditions of the world today in general are the best ever, right? We have the most comfortable material living, despite all the inequalities that may be there. Why do we need an alternative, right? So we'll spend a little bit of time on this. And then for our case, why do we need Islamic economics? Alternatives are already there. There are many people who put forward alternative economics, alternative finance, but we want to ask specifically, why Islamic economics? All right. And I think for anybody who knows the foundations of Islamic economics course, you know that we argue this question, why we need Islamic economics. We say that underlying every economics is a worldview. And definitely, this worldview impacts the way we understand and we practice our economics. And therefore, we want to talk about, the need for Islamic economics is because of the worldview. So we will try to explain and do a comparison between the worldview elements in Islamic economics and in modern economics. Make a comparison, and hopefully we will be able to show, because there are differences in that foundation, in that worldview, therefore there is a need for Islamic economics. We are not able to accept the current economics, in its totality. Now, I want to also specify here, our approach in the IIUM, in the Kuliah, in the department, as well as, I must also say, with the majority of Islamic economists who have been writing for the last 50 or 60 years, we agree that we do not have to throw out everything from modern economics. All right. There are a small minority of scholars who feel that we need to throw away everything from neoclassical economics. But let me be very clear. My position has always been that we do not need to throw away everything, but we need to critically evaluate what modern economics says. We need to do an evaluation. All right. And from that evaluation, we either accept, reject, or we modify. Right? So our position is to have critical interaction from an Islamic perspective. So we are going to critically evaluate modern economics and decide what we can adopt, what we need to modify, and what we need to reject. All right. And then a smaller part of this morning's, the first half, will be on what is Islamic economics. We will try to do a kind of a working definition, rather than talking about, details. Because as I said earlier, you will be able to get a clearer picture of what Islamic economics is as we go on, the next, I think, is it 11 weeks or something? Yes, you will be able to get a better picture of what Islamic economics is, and then there'll be a very, very short summary. All right, so let's move, because we really don't have much time. Why do we need an alternative? All right, and I think this is very, very, very important question. And as I mentioned just now, it is not only, in the Muslim world or among Islamic economists who are talking about an alternative. All right. At least in near memory, all of us can remember, if you're in Southeast Asia, of course, you will never forget 1997, 1998 Asian financial crisis. It was probably the worst crisis that many of us have gone through. Just the collapse of the financial markets in many Asian countries. More recently, 2008, 2009, we had something that was termed the subprime crisis, coming from America, but really impacting Europe. And some countries in the Muslim world were also affected. But it was really something that hit America and Europe. And what is very interesting, during that crisis, there was a briefing done by the London School of Economics to the Queen, about what the problem was, and what they were doing to resolve the crisis. And after hearing the briefing, the Queen asked, how come nobody noticed this thing coming? After all, we claim that we have all the sophisticated models and techniques here to analyze and to make predictions. Why did we not notice the problem coming? All right, and very interestingly, the commentators, they argued that there are different reasons for the crisis. Some are economics. For example, in the subprime crisis, the interest rates, because we're talking about conventional system, they were artificially low. Okay, so interest rates were artificially low. There were also a very high level of debt, especially when interest rates are low, more people will take loans. People who shouldn't have taken loans took loans, all right, and they got into debt. And then when the interest rates rose, many of them were hit. They could not pay back their loans, etc. So, but these are economic reasons, economic factors, all right. Now, there were also non-economic reasons for the crisis, and I think this is what I want to focus on, because a lot of writers, even in the West, they have talked about these non-economic factors, and they are saying it's not Islamic economists who are saying, although we have been talking about this for decades, but for this particular subprime crisis, many of the critics of mainstream neoclassical economics, they said that the reason why the subprime crisis happened is because of the underlying worldview of that mainstream neoclassical economics. All right, so what is it that this underlying worldview said? One, the belief science is not supposed, apparently in the West, right? Modern science says that belief has no place to play in science. And yet, commentators in the West say that there was a belief among mainstream neoclassical economists that economics cannot be wrong. Okay? They cannot be wrong. A belief. Secondly, assumption. We all make assumptions in economics, right? There are so many jokes about economists because of assumptions that we make. So the assumption that was being made by these neoclassical economists was that markets will solve everything. So if the interest rate goes down, then more people will come in, there will be greater supply, there will be greater demand for loans, and when there's greater demand, then the interest rate will rise if the supply is constant. So anything, prices going up and down, the market will resolve. Unfortunately, in the case of subprime crisis, and also actually in real life, markets do not sometimes solve all problems. Thirdly, and this is a very, very important part of modern economics, that from Islamic point of view, we have a great, I think, reservation. Our current models in economics recommend, accept man's greed as being a good trait in economics and finance. Man is the, self-interested, greedy maximizer. This is the economic agent that we study in our models, right? So this neoclassical economics foundations say that greed is good. All right, greed is good. Now, this is a major challenge because there is no ethical system that will accept greed as being a good trait for human beings. Greed is always seen as a negative trait. All right, but it is part and parcel of mainstream economics. I don't know if any of you had seen the movie Wall Street many years ago. Basically, in that movie, that is what the main character was actually giving advice. Greed is good, all right, and so that's part of our foundation of the models that we use. And finally, the fourth reason was that it was ethically acceptable to transfer risk in order to maximize your own gains. So if I'm having an instrument that is actually going to lose money, if I can transfer it to somebody else, it doesn't matter whether that person is going to lose and he is going to be affected negatively. That doesn't matter, because what matters is I don't get hit. So if I'm losing something, if I can transfer this to somebody else, that's fine. Ethically, it is okay. It is part of business. Why? Because you're only thinking of yourself. All right. Now, these 4 points, and there were many other points, these are the 4 points that were given by Western commentators themselves about why we cannot accept this economics that we have today. And of course, when I say economics, I'm referring to the business, I'm referring to the finance, because it basically is coming from that same foundation. So we need an alternative because of this. How can we, from an Islamic point of view, accept these 4 points? It is unacceptable. It is unacceptable. And I will try to argue this as we go along. Why Islamic economics? Why not we just follow, some of these other alternatives that have been given in the West? And believe me, some of those people who have argued and criticized neoclassical economics, sometimes their scientific arguments are actually even better argued than Islamic economics. Yeah, the way they criticize neoclassical economics and some of the alternatives they put are very well argued. Why do we need to talk about Islamic economics? All right. And of course, another way of putting this is, we have the conventional system that has been there for 350 years. It has been practiced. It has brought material progress. It has brought well-being to humankind. Why do we need Islamic economics? Especially now when anything you talk about Islamic economics is sometimes, seen negatively in many parts of the world. Why do we need Islamic economics? I think this is a very, very important question to ask ourselves. Yeah, and that is why I go back to some of our even Western writers. We don't want to give a claim at this moment from Quran or Hadith. We just go back even to the writings of Western scholars. So Joseph Schumpeter, in his 1954 classic History of Economic Analysis, it's a very big book, he said that any analytic effort, analysis, models, theories, anything that we do in the name that involves analysis is of necessity preceded by a pre-analytic cognitive act called vision. All right? Meaning to say, all economics, before we go into the analysis, it begins with a vision or a worldview. This is Joseph Schumpeter. All right? Now, this term vision, I think we can broadly, for this purpose of this class, we can equate it with worldview or even ideology. All right? Meaning to say what? Modern economics, the one that created the crisis, is not value-free. It is value-loaded. All right? And what we will argue is these values ultimately come from our worldview. All right? Worldview. So we need to get everybody to agree that modern economics, firstly, is not value-free. It is value-loaded. And secondly, we get our values of the system from that worldview. The foundations of the discipline is based on the worldview. Now, if this is something that we accept, then because there are different worldviews in the world, simple in economics, you have the capitalist system and the socialist system. They are both coming from different worldviews. All right? So if we accept the fact that there are different economic systems and different economics, And why do I say make a difference between the system and the economics? When I say economics here, I'm referring to the schools of thought in economics. So we have neoclassical economics, that is the mainstream that we teach in universities. But we also have institutional economics. We have post-Keynesian economics. We have the more radical schools of economics. Many different schools. They also have underlying worldviews that may differ. All right? Now, going back to the earlier point that there are assumptions in economics, many of the assumptions that we make in economics may not be true. And they are not universal. Okay, this, I took from another Western scholar, John Stuart Mill. He is one of the founding, one of the founding fathers of modern economics. And when he was writing in the 19th century, he basically said this in one of his books. The assumptions that we make in our models, they may not be true. So when I say that man is greedy, this may not be true. And it probably is not universal. It may be true for some people, but it is not true for other people. Okay? This is coming from Western scholars themselves. Yet, we teach in our universities, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, in Nigeria, in all Muslim countries, man is greedy, man is greedy. Man only thinks of himself. Right? Why? They themselves are saying that these assumptions may not be true and may not be universal. And yet, we don't question this when we teach our economics, right? So it's very important for us to keep this in mind when we are trying to develop alternatives, all right? And secondly, John Stuart Mill also says economists differ in their opinions. Even in his time, in the 19th century, there were debates between different political economists. And he said that these differences are because of their differences in their sources of knowledge. Of course, in the time of John Stuart Mill, he was referring to those political economists who used deduction as the main method of developing knowledge, versus those who wanted to talk about induction. So there was a deduction versus induction debate for 50 plus years. But we can accept this idea because sources of knowledge for Islamic economists now will also include not only the universe, it will also include revelation. So if you take revelation as a source of your knowledge, then economics will be different. You will argue differently, right? So what I'm trying to do with these few slides is just to show you that actually, even in the West, they have admitted centuries ago that different economics is possible. It's legitimate, right? The worldviews differ. Our sources of knowledge differ. And therefore, we should be developing an economics that is in line with our own value system. So what we're going to do, we are going to look at the worldview or the vision of Islamic economics and compare it with the worldview or vision of modern economics. This is being done to answer the question why we need Islamic economics and finance. Okay, so if we can show that the worldview is different, then we make a case for Islamic economics. All right. So when we talk about worldviews, I think it's very important to just give a very simple overview. Now, I'm sure many of you have also joined the classes with the Kuliah of Islamic Criminology, the first level, and now you're doing the second level. But I think in the first level, for sure, somebody would have talked about worldview, right? So whatever they said, please keep in mind. I'm just trying to give a very general overview, all right? Now, how at a phenomena, economic phenomena, you interpret certain things, right? You see prices going up. Today in the world, many countries are facing economic conditions that are not so good. Yeah, inflation, price levels are increasing. Unemployment is there. People losing jobs. So when you look at your current economic situation, you see something, right? So worldview, how they explain it is what you think you see. So when you look at something, you see something, right? But so you think you see this. How you understand that condition, all right? And then the judgment about what you see. This is good, this is bad, this needs to be improved, this needs to be reduced. Your judgment, all right? The assumptions that you make when you see that phenomena. Who is that economic man? How is he relating to the universe? The assumptions of your models when you want to do the description, the prediction, right, stems from your worldview. So, what is this worldview? It is impacted by many factors. In Western works that talk about worldview, sometimes they will put religion as part of culture. But I think from an Islamic point of view, we want to separate it because religion is not necessarily culture, is not necessarily part of culture. In fact, from an Islamic point of view, we do have a very famous hadith, that talks about, what happens when your culture and your religion, interact. If the cultural element is in line with the deen, then we can accept it. But if it is not in line, then we have a priority to go to the Quran and to the Sunnah. So I prefer to separate religion from culture, but these are different factors that impact worldview. And this also applies in the Muslim world. Even though we may all be Muslims, but because our culture differs, our education differs, our history differs, our geography differs, and of course the technology that we are using in our countries differ, this has an impact on our worldview. Certainly when we compare us with modern economics or modern Western societies, then certainly worldviews will differ because of all these factors. All right. So what's a worldview? It is more than just an interpretive lens. A worldview perspective shapes and influences and generally directs a person's entire life. Because people behave as they believe. Yeah, belief. So belief again comes, right, into the picture. Because you behave as you believe. Iman, amal. The worldviews guide the development of the values that inform your decisions and actions. Okay, so your worldview is basically going to determine, right, your values, and those values are going to be impacting the decisions you make in economics. Do you choose project A or project B? Do you choose halal or haram? This is going to be determined by your value system, and your value system ultimately goes back to your worldview. All right, so the worldview is the core essence and unchanging values that you keep. All right. Now, how do you analyze the worldview? Of course, this can be a whole, course by itself. And in IIUM, there is a course on Islamic worldview. Yeah. But for our purpose, we are going to talk about certain components or elements in the worldview. And again, this is stated by scientists globally. Any discussion of worldview must include views on the following components: religion, God, man, nature, knowledge, aim in life. Okay, Even if you are a atheist, you don't believe in God, then in your worldview, you will say God doesn't exist. But it must talk about God. Okay? So let's look at these components: religion, God, man, nature, very briefly, right? Because this part in our course in FIE, it takes about maybe a week or sometimes even more than a week to give in detail, but we're going to do it in in maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah, so please bear with me. Since we are talking about Islamic economics, so we are using the adjective Islamic in front of economics. And of course, when you say Islamic, you're talking about the religion of Islam. So let's begin our discussion on the components by looking at what we mean by religion. And I'm sure everybody here is well versed, so we don't really have to spend too much time on this. Yeah. In Islam, from an Islamic point of view, we all accept the idea that Islam is deen. We use the term in the Quran. The term for religion is deen. All right. Now, if you want to know in greater detail about this concept of deen, please read, among others, the one that we use in FIE, Professor Naqib Al-Attas, Islam and Secularism, a very detailed discussion of the concept of deen. Yeah. But Islam is deen. Now, I'm going to look at Montgomery Watt, a Catholic scholar he used to be based in the University of Edinburgh, and he wrote this book, What is Islam, in 1979. Okay, so I'm using him. Now, I like to use Montgomery Watt rather than Sheikh, whoever, because sometimes when you're speaking to Western economists, you need to quote, a scholar in the West. And in the case of this particular aspect, Montgomery Watt, I think, is saying something that we can all agree with. Yeah, Islam, our view of deen is it is a whole way of life. Yeah, private and public. It covers theology, ibadah, forms of worship, political theory, and even code of conduct, even hygiene, even etiquette is part of deen. So everything that we do, we consider to be part of deen. Unlike in the West, what is religion to them? And again, we are talking about, in the last 400 years, it means a way of spending an hour or so on Sunday. So basically going to church on Sundays, this is religion. If I can cut it short, religion in the West is basically certain rituals as understood in the West today in general. Now, there are many people in the West, of course, who have a different view of religion. Maybe some of them even see religion as a whole way of life. But in general, in the West, this is how they look at religion. And that is why in many studies, when they want to show how religious the people are in the West, they will look at church attendance. How many people go to church on Sunday, right? Now, from an Islamic point of view, yes, of course, going to the mosque is a very important part of being a Muslim, but we wouldn't equate how religious you are only with your mosque attendance, right? We have many other things to talk about religion, because religion is a full way of life. Look at the last part of this statement. Religion has nothing to do with commerce or economics. So this is the view that is adopted by many people, if not the majority of people in the West over the last 400 years. All right? So they have done what we call the secularization of society. So this is a very important part of Western society. Over the last 300, 400 years, it has happened in the West. And therefore, when we study economics, politics, psychology, sociology, all these disciplines are actually coming from Western European experience over the last 300 to 400 years. Whenever we teach economics, who do we go back to? Adam Smith. When did Adam Smith write his Wealth of Nations? 1776, right? So basically, whatever textbooks we are using ultimately go back to that period of time. In this, in the last 400 years of the West, we get all our disciplines that today we teach in universities in the Muslim world. And this 400 years in the West coincide with a period where the West underwent enlightenment, reformation, industrialization, and also secularization. All right. Now, in our FIE class, we spend quite a lot of time talking about, this process of secularization. But I think I will leave it, because I'm quite sure all of you have already, if you have attended the course by IRK, the first level, they would have talked about secularization, secularism as an ideology, secularization as a process, and then even the concept of secular, right? This world, here and now. So I don't want to maybe repeat, what has already been informed. So I'm just trying to look at the components. So as far as religion is concerned, we look at religion as a complete way of life, including economics. In the West, economics has nothing to do, or religion has nothing to do with economics. Now, what about God? Now, this is not, again, in the IRK course, you may have had much more detailed discussion about Allah and the theological arguments, the sifah of Allah, yeah, and discussion. For this particular part of the discussion on economics, I just want to say that in the Islamic view, in Islamic economics, of course, we accept the idea of Tawheed, which is the core value in Islam. There is only one God or Ilah that is to be worshipped, and that is Allah. And of course, we add our Shahada with the second part, that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is his messenger and prophet. Yeah. Now, there are many asma of Allah that you find in the Quran, right? And when you look at some of them, for example, Ar-Razzaq, the provider, Malik al-Mulk, the eternal owner of sovereignty, of everything, Al-Muqsit, the equitable. Now, when you look at these asma, many of them have economic implications. So when you say Allah is Ar-Razzaq, it means that ultimately Allah is providing rizq for you. Now, how does that affect economics? Very significantly. We don't accept the idea that we ourselves are the sole provider. Yeah, of course, the male, the father or the husband is supposed to provide for his family. But we also understand that Allah is Ar-Razzaq, the ultimate provider. Which means that whatever we provide is not coming from us only, but ultimately coming from Allah. This has a way and impacts the way we understand our wealth. So our wealth really is not our own absolutely. Yeah, and this has implication on property ownership and how you are supposed to spend your wealth and so on. We don't own absolutely anything. And that is why even when we pass away and we are giving inheritance, we cannot decide we want to give every part of our property to our first son. No, in Islam, because Allah is Malikul Mulk, even your own property, when you pass away, there are certain division. Certain amount goes to your son, certain amount goes to your daughter, certain amount will go to your wife, etc., etc., right? So there is a very important implication of the fact that you are not absolute owner, that Allah is the absolute owner. Al-Muqsit, equitable. When you are doing your economic transaction, you must be just. Yeah, important. And I think later when we talk about distribution, maybe somebody will talk about what it means to be just. Especially in Islamic finance, I believe today a lot of discussion about whether we want to use equity contracts or debt contracts. Yeah, and one of the asma of Allah is Al-Muqsit. Okay, so God is very present in everything we do. In modern economics, we don't talk about God in anything that we analyze and we do. There is no place, or there was no place for God or Bible in developing economics. Maybe in the early part, in the time prior to Adam Smith, and even during Adam Smith's time, religion was still an important part of the science that they were doing. But really today, no social scientist will accept the idea that when you want to develop your economics, you need to go back to the Bible. It will not be something that they do. Similarly, maybe in other religions, but certainly in Islam, we will always say our primary source of knowledge is Al-Quran and followed by Sunnah. So there is a very big difference in our view of God. So religion is central in economics. God is also ever present, in everything that we do. What about man? Of course, very, very important, because economics is a human science, is a social science. We are studying the behavior of man, right? Economics is all about man's behavior towards wealth, towards other people, right? So when we talk about man in Islam, again, I think you have done this in your IRK certificate. Man is insan, he is created good, he's fitrah, he is made of body and spirit, he is given aql and given knowledge, taught all the names, he is the best of creation, fi ahsani taqweem. And then he plays the dual role of being Abdullah and Khalifa fil ard. And both of these two roles got to be seen together. Sometimes, some of our scholars, they talk about man as Khalifa, man as Khalifa, man as Khalifa. Definitely he is Khalifa, but he is also Abdullah. So when we develop our Islamic economics, we have to develop both of these roles, not just the Khalifa part. Because sometimes if you only stress the Khalifa part without the Abd part, it may also make the Khalifa forget that he is Abdullah. In fact, I will argue later, you cannot actually be Khalifa if you don't accept being Abdullah. In modern economics, we talk about the rational economic man, right? Rational economic man. This rational economic man, as I mentioned just now, self-interested. And today, self-interest is equated with selfishness. And they are actually not the same. Self-interested maximizer of material satisfaction. So what does the consumer want to do? Maximize his utility. What does the firm want to do? Maximize their profit. Others' welfare, the workers, the stakeholders, the environment, this is not included in formal models of neoclassical economics. Although I have to admit, in today's new environment that we are living in, people are talking about sustainable development. They are talking about green environment issues, and now they are starting to bring in the environment and others into the decision making. All right, and Alhamdulillah, I think this is a good development, because I think from Islamic point of view, we have been actually saying this right from 50 years ago, but at that point in time, nobody wanted to listen. But I think today, because we have the developments of SDGs and other people are talking about corporate social responsibility, therefore we can now talk about man as no longer being the selfish maximizer. But still in modern economics, this is the formal models. They still talk about maximizing. So maybe later when our colleagues talk about consumption and production, they will tackle this issue. How do we deal with this idea that we should not only think of ourselves, but we should also think of others in our decision making? Right? So in modern economics, I think only of myself. But in Islamic economics, if I'm Abdullah and I'm Khalifa fil Ard, how does that impact my decisions in consumption, in production, in how I treat people? Yeah, we need to clarify this. All right. So man is also very important. And I love this quotation by Syed Hussein Nasser. There is no more dangerous creature on earth than a Khalifa Allah who no longer considers himself to be Abdullah. And maybe in the West, this is what has happened. Because they have taken away God from science. God is no longer involved in science, right? So once you take away God from science, then the science can promote the idea that man is the master. He is not the slave. But we are Abdullah. We are the slave of Allah. Abd, sometimes people use the word servant, but actually, the actual meaning of Abd is slave. We are the slaves of Allah. Right? And that is why I say, please, when we develop Islamic economics, we have to keep in mind we are Abdullah as well as Khalifa fil Ard. So the Abdullah has to guide the Khalifa. Yeah. So if you forget that you are Abdullah, you can become very, very dangerous. Yeah. I think it's an important point for us to keep in mind. Okay. Nature and universe. In Islam, Allah is the creator, the Khaliq, and everything else is the makhluk. Right? And therefore, when we talk about the universe, the nature, the world, it is a creation of Allah for man. Right? And there are so many verses, and I'm just, giving you Surah Al-An'am. It talks of vegetation, fruits, night and day, heavens and earth, human beings, rain, so many different things you find in the Quran talking about the creation, which is created for man, because man is the Khalifa, man is Abdullah. Yeah? Man is going to be in control or responsible or be the trustee of the universe. So if you're the trustee, you cannot do anything you like. You have to follow the terms of the trust, right? So nature is seen as ayatullah, as a sign of God's existence. All right. Now, when we talk about nature or the world or the universe, we also accept the idea that there is the material world, the world that we see, that we are living in. There is also the alamul ghaib, the world that we cannot see. Now, I put it there because I want to stress a very important point. Economics, and I will argue even Islamic economics, is not about talking about the alam al-ghaib. Economics and Islamic economics is talking about this world. We are doing economics in this world. We are looking at the resources in this world. We are looking at human beings in this world. We are having wealth in this world. All right? Now, how does the alam ghaib come into our decision making? Basically, what we mean by universe is material world as well as world of ghaib. It means that we know that there is a world hereafter. Yeah, there is a Yawmul Akhirah, and when we die in this world, we will go to this next world. And therefore, when we say there is a world of ghaib, we need to understand that our decisions that we make in this world must also make sure that we get success not only in this world but in the hereafter. So our decision making in this world, which is what Islamic economics is going to focus on, must recognize the world hereafter. Okay, very important for us to keep that in mind, and we must make sure that we don't confuse. Yeah, so Islamic economics is not going to be an economics that's talking about alam ghaib. Yeah, this is not the business of Islamic economics. But as a Muslim, the central worldview is there is a world in the hereafter. So if you live in this world for 70 years or 80 years, or if you are lucky longer, right? Whatever decision you make in your economic life must give you success for your 70 years in this world, but don't sacrifice your 70 years. Sorry, don't sacrifice your eternal life in the hereafter for pleasure, just for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in this world, right? So if Allah says riba is haram, then in your daily dealing in this world, you shouldn't deal with riba. If you deal with riba, you are sacrificing your hereafter, which is eternal, just for maybe you make extra money and wealth in this world, but it is based on riba, and this will give you loss in the hereafter. So a rational decision in Islamic economics will be make sure you don't have riba, even if it means that the profit of that project is less. But if it is riba based, this is not acceptable to you. It is irrational for you to take a project that has riba but gives you more material profit in this world, and you lose in your eternal life, right? So this very important. The worldview is now going to impact how you choose your projects. Okay, keep that in mind, and I hope when our colleagues discuss consumption and production, they will talk about this in greater detail, inshallah. Okay, so let's move, and my slide is in modern economics, because of that secularization process. So if you read Professor Alatas, when he talked about this process of Islam and secularism, he discussed secularization, and he was commenting on this book by Harvey Cox, The Secular City, and he talked about secularization process. And this secularization process is made up of different components: the desacralization of politics, disenchantment of nature, and there was the third one, the deconsecration of values. All values become relative. Okay, man is the master of the world, and what is good today, tomorrow may not be necessary, may not be considered to be good, and therefore I can actually do whatever I want because man is the master. Yeah. So desacralization of politics. You take away authority from God, you give it to man. This is one of the elements that Harvey Cox talked about in the process of secularization, which Professor Alatas has elaborated wonderfully and applied it from an Islamic perspective. All right. For a science, only this visible world is real and relevant. Yeah, and that is why in modern economics, they are talking about maximizing profit. And that profit is meant as material profit. They are not talking about the profit that you will get in the hereafter, right? In Islamic economics, yes, we want to make profit, but we have to remember whatever we do, make sure we don't lose in the hereafter. Aim in life. Now, in modern economics, as I mentioned, the aim is to maximize material gain in this world. So all your models, no matter how sophisticated they are, it will be, even if they are long-term models, they are still talking about yourself or your company in this world. In Islamic economics, what is our goal in life, our aim in life? We want to achieve as stated in the Quran, falah, ultimate success. How do we do this? Our entire purpose in this world is to perform ibadah. Whether it is ibadah khusus or ibadah umum. And by ibadah umum, we are including economics. How we transact, the projects that we do, the wealth that we obtain, how we use that wealth. Yeah, all of this, if we do it with right intention, with right knowledge, and with right action, it is considered to be ibadah. Okay? And economics also requires us to develop the earth to achieve God's pleasure. Yeah, mardatillah. In order to do this, Imam Al-Ghazali talks about the different means, yeah, the fadila, the fadail. We have 4, as mentioned by Imam Al-Ghazali: fadilah nafsiyah, fadilah jismiyah, fadilah kharijiyah, and fadilah tawfiqiyah. And economics comes under kharijiyah, wealth. So having wealth is better than not having wealth, because if you have wealth, you can actually do things, right? So there are so many verses in the Quran, there are many verses in the very many hadith that talk about the importance of, you know, giving zakat, and you don't pay zakat unless you have the wealth. The hand that gives is better than the hand that receives, right? So having wealth is one of the means for you to achieve falah. But wealth alone is not going to be enough if you don't have iman, if you don't have good character. All right? And of course, if you're having a healthy body, if you have strength rather than weakness, that is better for you because you can do more. If you have a long life, it is better than short life, because in a long life, you can do more ibadah. Of course, if you have a long life and you are not doing good things, better to have short life. but generally speaking, ceteris paribus, a long life is better than short life. All right. Now, even if you have all the first 3, we still always make dua to Allah. Please give us tawfiq. Please give us hidayah. Please, you know, give us the barakah so that all our ibadah is accepted. Yeah? This is fadilah tawfiqiyah, divine grace. So we work for number 1, number 2, number 3, and we ask Allah to give us number 4. And if Allah gives number 4, this means we are blessed. Yeah? And falah is there. Okay, but in order to do this, we need knowledge and action. Just by having iman alone is not enough. We need the knowledge, and then we need the action. So iman, amal must go together, and based on ilm, right? So all of them go together, knowledge and action. I think again you have done this in your IRK source, so I don't need to repeat it. It's very, very important. Ilm is, you know, Islam is probably the religion that stresses ilm the most, right? Many times in the Quran, ilm and its derivatives appear. It is a obligatory requirement, fard. Yeah, some knowledge is fardu ain, and some knowledge fardu kifayah. Our sources of knowledge. Remember, I gave a quotation earlier that people differ because of their sources of knowledge. Now, as far as Islam is concerned and Islamic economics is concerned, our sources of knowledge will be revelation. And in the writings of scholars, they say revelation is a primary source. And then the universe is a secondary source. Some people say reason is also another source of knowledge. Others just say revelation and universe. Reason is a means of acquiring. Okay, we don't want to quibble with this. But even if we accept reason as a secondary source, what I want to stress here is this. When we say primary and secondary, we don't want to give the relationship as if secondary is less important than primary. This is not the relationship between primary and secondary. How should we understand the relationship between primary and secondary? It is something like primary school and secondary school. Okay? Nobody will say that secondary school is less important than primary, or that primary school is more important than secondary school. No. Right? What do you mean by primary, secondary? It means that the secondary school and education is built on the primary. Yeah, if you don't know how to read or write, which you do in primary school, then you cannot do the details in physics and chemistry and economics in secondary school or in university. So let's keep that understanding between primary and secondary. The universe, our akal, is based on what is stated in Revelation. So it is not that it is less important, but it is just something that has to be guided always and based on Revelation. All right, I hope this will be sufficient to move. And action, very important, because economics is action as well. Economics is just not knowledge. Economics is not just the discipline called economics. We do economics every day in our life. We decide what to buy. We decide how we deal with other people. Yeah, we get our income. We spend our income. So it is action. All right. Now, good action is ibadah. Yeah, good action is ibadah. Good economic action is ibadah. What qualifies as good action? If it has correct intention, correct knowledge, and of course, correct practice. And when we do it in this with correct intention, correct knowledge, etc., we are meeting the Sharia requirements. Yeah, the guidance that Allah has given. And therefore, our economic actions can be part of our ibadah. Okay, so it's important for us to keep in mind that when we do our economics, it is seen as part of that ibadah umum. Why? Because that's the purpose of our life in this world. It is to perform ibadah to Allah. Now, why we perform that ibadah, this is maybe a subject of another course. Yeah, we don't need to do. Now, I hope I have spent almost 1 hour talking about this and showing you that the Islamic worldview is actually different from the worldview of modern economics. Islamic economic worldview, there are differences, big differences with the modern economics worldview. And therefore, according to what we had said just now, there is a basis, there is a case for Islamic economics. All right? And I think this is very, 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 very important. All right? Now, let me just finish with another 15 minutes or so, and then I will open for some, Q&A from all of you. What is economics? Okay? Once we have established that there is a basis for Islamic economics. Why? Because the underlying worldview is different. And we consider that it is very important for us to have an alternative, because the current system is not able to be sustainable, right? And I think the developments in the last 30-40 years clearly show that we need an alternative, and for us that alternative is Islamic economics. Now, what is it? Firstly, economics deals with production, consumption, distribution, finance, exchange. Yeah, this is economics. I always tell in class, if you walk by, and then you find a book on the table, and the book doesn't have a cover, so you do not know what the book is. You start opening the pages. When you read the pages, immediately you should know whether this is economics or not. So if that book has chapters that talk about producer behavior, consumer behavior, market structure, externalities, role of government, inflation. This is economics. But if you read a book that starts with, a recipe, how to cook a soup, this is not economics, right? So we must be clear, whether we are talking about economics or Islamic economics, the scope of our subject must be dealing with economics, right? So the topics that we are doing in this course that will come after this, next week, for the next 10, 11 weeks, it is economics. Yeah. And therefore, it is important for us to keep in mind that Islamic economics deals with economics. It doesn't deal with something that is in some other subject matter. It doesn't deal with fiqh, mu'amalat. Now, I'm saying this because in banking today, Islamic banking today, it seems as if the Islamic part is the fiqh part. And I want to correct this. The Islamic part about Islamic finance is not only the fiqh part, it is the finance part. The Islamic part about Islamic economics is not the fiqh part. It's not the mu'amalat part in economics. It is the economics part of economics. That means Islamic economics is for production, for consumption, for distribution, for market structure. It is not just the fiqh rules. It is not just the hukum, the halal, the haram. No. In fact, I will even argue, for Islamic economics, our decisions don't have to talk about the haram. This is the job of the fuqaha. Let the fuqaha determine what is halal, what is haram. Economics is all about choosing the best within the halal domain. So in production, we don't have to bother, is this halal or haram? It is already given to us. Should be lah. Yeah, unfortunately, I think we are still talking about what is halal, what is haram. It's okay. We are still developing the discipline. But actually, economics, Islamic economics should be focusing on how we make the best decisions within the halal domain. Okay? Now, due to relative scarcity, and believe me, this is another topic we can discuss one whole day or week talking about scarcity. Do we have scarcity or not? But I would like to just say there is relative scarcity even from an Islamic point of view. We may understand it differently. We have to make choices. Even in Islamic economics, you cannot get everything you want. You will have to make choice. All right? And we want to make good choices. Remember, ibadah is good action. We want to make good choices, correct choices. We want to make the best choice. That is what economics is all about, right? So once you are given, this is the halal domain. Between A or B or C, we want to choose the best. This is Islamic economics. How we choose between the different halal options, not to choose the lowest denominator. Why? Because it is halal. Yes, of course, it is halal, but there is something better. Economics wants you to choose the better option. All right? Now, this especially in the case of banking finance, I think we have been arguing for a long time about murabaha and mudarabah and a lot of argument. Yeah. So we are not talking about whether murabaha is halal or haram. Even if it is halal, we still want to choose which is the better option. And not just continue murabaha, 99% of all transaction murabaha. Why? Because, this is the one that gives the banks profit. We want to choose the better option, the best option, not only for the bank, but also for all stakeholders, right? This is the job of economists. Yeah. I think, unfortunately, in the last 30, 40 years, economists have not been involved in banking finance enough. Yeah, we have left banking and finance to the bankers and to the Sharia advisors, and they have been focusing on the fiqh approach to banking. We need to talk about making the best choice within the halal domain. This will be Islamic economics. All right. Now, I'm just, some broad definitions of economics, just for those of you who have no background. The third definition is the standard definition that we use in modern economics today in our textbooks by Lionel Robbins. Economics is a science which studies human behavior. So, human beings, important, as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. So you have scarce means and you have certain ends that you want to achieve, and therefore you have to make choices. So even in modern economics, the idea is making choice. Islamic economics also about making choice, but our choices are determined by our value system. Right? Our interaction in order to produce that economics is based on our social system, our social laws, our culture, right? And therefore, worldview is very, very important. So again, I go back to my earlier point. Our economics needs to be determined by Islamic worldview, by the Sharia, by our sources of knowledge. That is going to influence our decision making. What is Islamic economics? Okay, now to put it in context, it is part of deen. It is part of the religion, because religion is a complete way of life. It deals with production, consumption, distribution, exchange, finance, and so on. Yeah, but it must be according to Islamic worldview. We want to make choices according to Islam. And of course, because the job scope of economics is not just theory, right? We want to describe something, we analyze the problem, and then we make prescription, right? You go to the doctor tells you you have a headache, you have fever, and then stop. No, the doctor has to prescribe something. Please take Panadol or please whatever, right? So economics also, we describe the problem, we try to answer why the problem occurs, and then we try to solve it. So it must involve, all of these stages must involve Islamic criteria, the Sharia criteria. And again, I want to stress, the Sharia criteria is not only the fiqh criteria. Sharia is much more than fiqh. All right, some definitions of Islamic economics. I've just chosen a few. There is an article that Dr. Hafaz and me wrote about the subject matter of Islamic economics. I think we give many more, so please refer. My definition that I gave, many years ago, Islamic economics is the approach to and process of interpreting and solving man's economic problems based on the values, norms, laws, and institutions found in and derived from the sources of Islam or the Sharia. Okay, now that's maybe important to break it down. In the FIE class, we actually break down and go one by one. And then Islamic finance, in order to finance the economic activity, we need to have institutions using instruments according to rules and regulations which are all bound by the Sharia. So finance is supposed to facilitate real economic activity. I think everyone will agree, right? The problem with finance is sometimes it is not connected to the real economic activity. So we agree with that. John Maynard Keynes, another I love the quotation by Maynard Keynes. He was saying that the relationship of money to the economy. Yeah? He said money to the economy is like oil to the engine, the black oil, the engine oil. Money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Why do we need money? Because it helps to facilitate real economic activity. So money to the economy is like oil to the engine. Why do you need the oil in the engine? So that the engine moves smoothly. But you cannot focus on the oil all the time. Unfortunately, in the world today, we talk about the oil, we talk about the oil, we talk about the oil. We spend hours and publications written on the oil, on money, on banking, on finance. But we don't talk enough about what the finance is for. Yeah? So hopefully this certificate in Islamic economics will try to talk about the engine, the economy, the real economic activity, and why finance needs to be serving the economy. Some unique features of Islamic economics. Firstly, Islamic economics and Islamic finance have the central position of revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah as ultimate authority. So the source of knowledge, very important. This makes Islamic economics, Islamic finance different from conventional economics and finance. The Quran is known as Al-Furqan. It is, even Allah is telling us that the Quran is supposed to be the criterion for you in all your decision making. The Sharia is a total guidance for man. It should not be limited to the law or legal aspect. For economics, the ethical dimension is very important. And I think later there will be a discussion on ethics and why it's important. How do we use the Quran and the Sunnah and the works of scholars in the process of developing Islamic economics and finance? We need to use the aql, but correctly, through the process of ijtihad. Okay. So if I go back to that definition, Islamic economics is an approach to and process of. So it is an approach that we take. It is a process that we have to undergo. We interpret the economic problems. We then solve the economic problems. How do we solve it? It has to be based on the values, the norms, the laws, and institution. Now, keep in mind, it's not only the law. So I talk about values, I talk about norms, I talk about institutions and laws. Either you find it directly in the sources of Islam, riba is haram. You find it directly in the Quran. Or you have to derive. Sometimes you're not going to find all the detailed solutions in the Quran, so you have to derive from the sources, all right? Most economic applications will have to be derived. In order to derive correctly, we need to understand the Islamic worldview, especially the Islamic vision of economics, so that the Islamic or the Sharia boundary of economics can be determined. The Sharia must be interpreted and applied. This is what ijtihad is, right? You interpret and apply. Sharia, you interpret it to develop fiqh. Fiqh, again, not understood only as law. I may even argue muamalat is also, economics is also fiqh. I look at the Quran, I look at the Sunnah, I look at the other secondary sources, I develop economics. This is interpreting the Sharia components into the discipline called economics, right? And then through a certain methodology in order to develop models and theories. Now, I believe this part will be handled by our next speaker, Dr. Mahyudi, who will be talking about methodology and about why ethics is important. I think that's it. Okay, these are some very limited references. Please refer to the Foundation of Islamic Economics. There will be a textbook, inshallah, coming out soon. I hope everybody may be able to get access to that, called Foundations of Islamic Economics. in the time being, I think I will stop here. And if there is, yeah, it's 10:34 now. Maybe 10 minutes, if you don't mind. You know, we can extend a little bit because we started a little late. So welcome for any questions that you may have. Wallahu alam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, let me quickly see if there are some questions. I think there are maybe a few. I don't know if somebody can also. Okay, I'm just going to take. There's just a lot of salam here, so let me just go down and see if there's a question. Sorry, there is a question here. Can this course be done through Facebook? I think yes. Yeah, please. Okay, that's still. Yeah, it's still all salams.
Bro, go to the bottom, bro.
Yes, at the bottom.
At the bottom.
Right at the bottom. Okay, I'm going down. Okay, well, there's a very long one here. Okay, in Islam, we believe in the multiplex reality, that is physical existence, then non-material existence, and divine existence. Whereas the Western philosophy, I cannot get this. Okay, hold on. Western philosophy, I can't get the question because it doesn't come out. Whereas the Western philosophy is reductionist and focus on, and then I lose the question after that. Focus on.
You can freeze it, bro. Just click on the question. It will freeze.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't seem to get it. Maybe Sharan, can you read the
question? Let me read the question.
Yeah, okay, bro. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. In Islam, we believe in multiplex reality, that is physical existence or materialism, then non-material existence, idealism, and divine existence, revelations. Whereas the Western philosophy as a selfish being who maximizes his benefit. Is it true to say that we need Islamic economics as an alternative is because of the emancipations of modern economics from ethics and because of holistic worldview that Islam offers? So that's the question.
The short answer is yes. The long question, the answer is yes, right? I mean, definitely that is one of the important reasons why we talk about Islamic economics. Actually, even in the West and in globally, there are many people who also feel that there is importance for us to look at a holistic view. But our holistic view, of course, as you mentioned, will be based on our view of how we view the universe and resources, etc. Our challenge, of course, is how to develop it. I think everybody may agree with this, but how do you develop a contemporary discipline called Islamic economics that is able to represent all the things that we want? I think this is the challenge. Okay. Next question, is it true Islamic banking nowadays still use the capitalist models of calculating hibah formula? Are there alternatives? As far as Islamic banking, I will leave it to the person who's going to speak on banking to answer. But are there alternatives? Of course, there are many alternatives to Islamic banking. One of the things that is very clear today is the banking that dominates in Islamic banking is commercial banking. Yeah, commercial banking. But today, for the last 15-20 years, we also have something called social banking, right? It has come as an alternative banking, which wants to provide funding for those who commercial banks don't provide capital. So it's another form of banking. We can also talk about non-banking finance. Why only banking, right? We can talk about cooperatives. Cooperatives is one of those things that are really not discussed a lot. Why? Because the performance of cooperatives sometimes has not been very good, and because the performance is bad, people think it's a bad option. But that is another option. We have the capital market with sukuk playing a very important role. So I think there are many different institutions that we can look at. Yes, we are still in the framework of the capitalist system. A little bit more difficult. So I think somebody is going to talk about economic systems, maybe if not next week, the week after. maybe they will explain a little bit more detail on this. Yeah. Your emphasis on our economic system should be determined in Sharia, but how do you adopt this notion in Malaysia since this country is embedded? Is embedded or secular system? Seek your valuable view. Yeah, of course, not only Malaysia, but I think all countries, maybe we are affected by our history. And when you talk about adopting the Sharia, then different countries will have different approaches. I believe now in Pakistan, if anybody is following the latest developments, there was a kind of instruction or decision made by the Federal Sharia Court telling that the government should move to a riba-free system, not only banking but riba-free system in 5 years, right? And so Pakistan situation is there is a Federal Sharia Court that has instructed how effective or how much weight that will be. We will have to see. But in all countries, this is a challenge. In the case of Malaysia, of course, it's even more challenging because we have a good big size of non-Muslim population, and therefore the way that we go about moving to a Islamic economic system is something that must keep in mind, that Islamic economics, Islamic banking, Islamic finance must be for everyone, not only for Muslims. We have to be able to present Islamic economics and banking and finance as the preferred choice of everybody. And how do you do that? You have to show that Islamic economics, Islamic banking works. We can have certificate after certificate, we can talk for hours and years. Practice and success in that practice is the best education. If you can show that it works, people will follow you. So it is our duty, right, to make sure that we can show Islamic economics works. How is it going to be put into practice? This will depend on the country. If you're in Iran, if you're in Pakistan, it may be a different way of implementing. In Malaysia, a different way. In Indonesia, a different way, right? Because we have our own history, we have our own context. How does Islamic economics and finance answer the problem of scarcity in the money supply? I'm not sure. Do we have scarcity in the money supply? I will maybe leave this question to the person who's going to talk about money and banking or monetary policy. Yeah. But let me just say in general that the whole issue of money is an important issue in Islamic economics. There are many actually, who are very, very concerned about our current way money is created through the fractional reserve banking system. One of the critics that I happen to support a lot, and it actually came from one of our scholars in the 1980s, Omar Chapra, one of the pioneers of Islamic economics. When we were reviewing his 1985 book, Towards a Just Monetary System, he asked a very important question. He said, we put money in the banks, okay, and then the banks loan it out, right? We learned this in standard economics, right? So it's our money. The banks loan it out, and yet the bank keeps the majority profit to the bank. So our money, but we just get a small return. The bank, and maybe even the bank management and bank shareholders, they get the big amounts of money. Not to mention the top management will get big returns. But what is it that the people get? Because it's their money in the banks, right? So he was saying that we need to devise a new system where we also share the profit of the bank with the people, not just the return they give, the small return, but more than that. All right. Now, that was Omar Chapra in 1980s. More recently, I believe Richard Werner has written a book on how money is created, and he argues that actually the bank doesn't need your money. to give out loans. They create the money from just the deposit, the debit, credit, the asset liability thing. They create money. So private banks are creating money, and of course, in the process, profiting, right? So what is an Islamic view of that? Okay, some people are talking about gold and silver. I'm not necessarily a supporter of only gold and silver. I have no problem gold and silver, but I do believe we can reform the current system. Maybe like how Omar Chapra is proposing, or how Prof. Abbas Mirajo is proposing. We can improve the current system. Can we have your slides? I think the organizers are making the slides available to everybody. Is choosing halal not the best choice? Sorry, is choosing halal not the best choice of economic behavior in maximizing satisfaction in the long run? So that the halal choice should be the best. Oh, yes, of course. But what is halal, and how do you determine that halal? That is the details that we need to work out. There's a lot of investment application this 21st century. How can some as Muslim identify halal investment site? Oh, I think this is beyond my investment side. Maybe Prof. Gairu knows more about the internet. I have to say I'm a little bit backward in this. Can individual embark on establishing Islamic finance house? Again, I think I leave it to people who are going to talk about Islamic banking and finance. Maybe I think that's about it. So I maybe aim in life. What's the difference between influence versus having cables? Yeah, as I keep telling my students, I make them make a promise every year that they are not going to be the cables. Yeah, we have too many people who want to get finance, or want to get money, or want to get wealth just by doing middleman job. Yeah, so middleman is not something that we should be encouraging in Islamic economics. In fact, I would even go to the extent this middleman job is unearned gain. You are gaining by doing nothing really necessary. I can go directly to the source, but I use a cable. I use intermediary. Unearned gain, and that is what raises the cost of everything. It should be eliminated from the system. Yeah, so I think we need to be. That's another very interesting area. So Robert, you should do a master's or undergraduate thesis in this area and try to figure out, how to kill the influence and cables. All right, I think I hand this back to Prof. Gairu.